Hello everyone, and welcome back to When She Broke Us channel. Today, we have an incredible story, one that's dark, emotional, and shocking. It's a story about betrayal, humiliation, and the kind of heartbreak that leaves scars you can't see. We're sitting down with a man whose story will take you through a whirlwind of emotions, and I promise you, this is one you won't be able to look away from. From the first moment, through the betrayal, to the shocking aftermath, this is raw, unfiltered truth. So sit tight, make sure you're not alone for this one, and hear it straight from him. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us your name and a little about yourself, and then share your story with us?
My name is Michael. I've lived most of my life believing in loyalty, love, and that the person you choose to marry would stand beside you through everything. I never thought my marriage would turn into something that felt like a nightmare. But here I am, sitting in this room, telling the story I never imagined I'd have to tell. It all started with what should have been a normal Friday night. Emily, my wife, and I were invited to a friend's birthday party in Manhattan. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The city lights sparkled, music filled the loft, and the air smelled of champagne and laughter. I thought we'd have a good time together. I thought it would be a night to remember for happy reasons. I remember watching her laugh with our friends. Her hair was shining. The dress she wore hugged her in all the right ways. I felt pride, almost like the world could see the person I loved and admire her as much as I did. But as the night progressed, a subtle change began to creep into her behavior. At first, it was little comments, mocking my choices, jokes about my work, things that friends might not even notice. But I did. I felt it, and my stomach sank. Then it got worse. She started calling me names in front of everyone. She laughed, and I didn't know whether to join in or to shrink into myself. That's when she said it. "You're such a cuckold, Michael," she said, loud enough for the room to pause and all eyes to flick to me. I froze. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. How could she say something like that? In front of everyone? I remember trying to laugh it off, to hide my humiliation, but the laughter died in my throat. My friends looked uncomfortable, unsure if they should intervene or just stay silent. Emily didn't care. She leaned closer, whispering with a smirk, "You really are pathetic. You know that, right?" My mind was spinning. I felt a wave of shame, betrayal, and disbelief all at once. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony. The cool air hit my face, but it didn't calm me. I was shaking, my chest tight. I couldn't believe this was happening. I loved her. I trusted her. And yet here she was, tearing me down in front of everyone I knew. I felt small, invisible, crushed under the weight of her words. I walked the streets for hours afterward, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe she didn't mean it. But then I received a text. A simple, casual, "Everything okay?" It was Emily, as if nothing had happened. My blood ran cold. How could she act like nothing happened after publicly humiliating me? By the time I got home, I felt broken. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, and thinking, how did my life turn into this? How did someone I loved so completely become someone who could hurt me so intentionally? That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her laughter, her face as she watched me shrink. Something inside me changed that night. Something dark. Something I couldn't undo. I wanted answers. I wanted truth. And somewhere in the chaos of my emotions, a plan began to form. Not of revenge yet, but of clarity. I needed to know what I was dealing with, what I had married. And I feared, deep down, that the truth would be worse than I could imagine. The next morning, I woke up still feeling the weight of the previous night pressing down on me like a heavy, invisible hand. I tried to convince myself it was just a bad joke, a twisted attempt at humor from Emily, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Her smirk, the way her eyes lit up when she said it, it was deliberate. She wanted me to feel small, inferior, exposed. I couldn't stop replaying her words over and over. "You're such a cuckold, Michael." Every syllable struck me like a punch. I tried to go about my day normally, brushing it off with fake smiles at work, but nothing felt normal. Every little thing reminded me of her betrayal. Every notification on my phone made my stomach twist, expecting another casual, cruel remark. By the time evening came, I was already drained, emotionally exhausted. Emily insisted we go out again, to another friend's gathering, just the two of us, she said. I wanted to say no. I wanted to stay home, lock the doors, and avoid everyone. But I agreed, almost numbly, unable to say why. Maybe I was hoping it was a one-time thing. Maybe I wanted to see if she would apologize. At the party, the pattern repeated, but worse. She was charming to everyone else, laughing, dancing, making jokes. But whenever she looked at me, it was like she was calculating the exact moment to cut me down again. She whispered things so casually, yet so cutting, that I could barely speak without trembling. Each comment was like a needle, slowly unraveling my self-respect. When she finally called me out in front of a group of friends, the room froze. "Michael, you're really pathetic. I don't know how you let me do this to you," she said. Laughter followed her words, half from friends unsure how to react, half from her. I felt my face burn, my hands go cold. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink through the floor. I remember stepping away, pretending to check my phone, trying to compose myself. But the laughter echoed in my head, louder than any music. I could feel my friends' eyes on me, sympathy mixed with embarrassment. No one knew what to say. No one knew how to stop her. And I realized then that she had complete control over the narrative, over me. As the night wore on, I watched her dance with other men, flirt, laugh. Every smile she gave them was a dagger to my chest. I realized that her humiliation of me wasn't just for fun. It was a statement, a claim. She wanted everyone to know that she could, and that I was powerless to stop it. When I finally left, alone, walking the darkened streets of the city, I felt like a ghost. Every step was heavy, every breath labored. I couldn't believe this was my life. I kept thinking about her voice, the casual cruelty, the way she enjoyed the spectacle of my suffering. It was surreal. I kept asking myself, how could I have been so blind? The first humiliation had stripped me bare. Not just in front of friends, but inside. I felt exposed, raw, and helpless. I realized that love doesn't always protect you. Sometimes, it blinds you to the reality of who the person in front of you truly is. That night, the seeds of suspicion, anger, and eventual revenge were planted. By the time I got home, I was quiet, almost numb. I didn't know what I was feeling more, hurt, rage, or the growing need to reclaim control. But one thing was certain, I could never look at Emily the same way again. Something fundamental had broken, and I knew there was no going back to the person I had been. The following weeks were like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Emily's words didn't just sting. They lingered, carved into my mind like scars that refused to heal. Every conversation, every casual remark, was loaded with subtle digs. At first, I tried to laugh along, to pretend it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew that pretending only made it worse. One night, at a small dinner with friends, she did it again. I was telling a story about my work, something I thought was interesting, and she interrupted with a laugh. "Oh, Michael, that's so cute. You really think anyone cares?" My chest tightened. I could feel my face burning, my hands clenching under the table. The room went quiet for a moment, everyone sensing the cruelty, but no one spoke. She didn't stop there. She leaned closer, smiling at me in a way that made my stomach turn, and whispered, "You really are pathetic. I mean, I married you, so I guess that says enough." I wanted to vanish, to crawl under the table and never come out. My friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to intervene or ignore it. I could barely breathe. Everywhere we went, the pattern repeated. At the gym, she mocked me for lifting too little. Parties, she laughed at my jokes before cutting me down with a single phrase. At home, even in private, she would drop casual insults that stung more than any public humiliation. It was like she had made it her mission to erode every ounce of confidence I had left. I started keeping track of every word, every sneer, every mocking tone. I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining it, that this was real. And it was. Each remark was intentional, each joke a weapon. I realized she didn't just want to embarrass me. She wanted to own me, reduce me to a version of myself that I didn't even recognize. One evening, she called me a cuckold again. This time in a quiet, private moment at home. But the intimacy didn't soften it. In fact, it made it worse. She looked at me like she was admiring her own power, and I felt utterly exposed. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but I didn't. I just sat there, feeling every ounce of my dignity slip away. I couldn't sleep for nights. I replayed her words over and over, imagining ways I could respond, imagining ways I could stop her. But fear and love tangled together in my chest, making every thought heavy. I loved her. I had loved her for years. And yet, she treated me like I was nothing, like I existed solely for her amusement. Friends tried to comfort me. Some suggested counseling. Some said, maybe she doesn't mean it. But I knew better. I could feel it deep inside, the deliberate cruelty, the enjoyment she took in my pain. That realization was like a knife twisting in my gut. I was trapped in a life where the person I trusted most had weaponized their love into a tool of humiliation. It was during one of these moments, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, that the first real thoughts of revenge started creeping in. Not violent revenge, not physical, but a cold, calculated reclaiming of power. I couldn't undo the humiliation, but maybe I could regain control. Maybe I could make sure she would never have that kind of power over me again. By the time I went to bed that night, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and clarity. My love for her was still there, but it was twisted now, mixed with anger, betrayal, and a burning need to see justice in some form. And somewhere in the depths of that mix, the first steps toward my eventual decision were forming. After that night, I couldn't look at the city the same way again. The streets that once felt alive now seemed cold, distant, as if they were mocking me with every neon light. I walked home alone, each step heavier than the last. My mind replayed everything she said, everything she did. I couldn't stop the mental loop. Every laugh, every smirk, every whisper seemed to echo endlessly in my head. When I finally got home, I sat on the edge of the bed and didn't move for what felt like hours. I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus, and sleep was impossible. My phone buzzed. I looked at it and froze. It was Emily. Everything okay? The message read, casual, sweet, as if nothing had happened. My hands trembled. I stared at it, unable to respond. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but at the same time I wanted answers. Her next text came almost immediately. What's wrong, babe? I love you. My chest tightened so severely it was hard to breathe. How could she say those words after everything? After the humiliation, the mockery, the deliberate cruelty? I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. This was not just casual indifference. This was manipulative, calculated. I tried to call her, my voice trembling, but she picked up in that same sweet, casual tone, pretending like nothing had happened. She asked me if I was tired, if I was hungry, if I had fun. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, I said nothing. My silence spoke volumes, though she barely seemed to notice. As the hours passed, I started connecting dots that I had ignored before. Her flirting with others at the party, the way she laughed too loudly at someone else's jokes, the secretive glances, the late-night friends-only texts. A pit formed in my stomach. I knew deep down, that something had happened, something she wasn't telling me. The realization was crushing. I had trusted her completely, opened my life and my heart to her, and she had betrayed me. The word betrayal felt insufficient. What she did wasn't just cheating, it was a complete violation of everything I believed our marriage to be. It was personal, intimate, and public in a way I couldn't forget. I spent the night pacing, unable to sleep, haunted by the image of her face. The casual smile, the way her eyes sparkled when she thought she had power over me. I remembered every detail from the party. Her laughter, the whispers, the way my friends looked at me as if they could see inside my soul and pity me. I felt exposed, completely naked emotionally. By morning, a cold, hard determination settled in. I needed to know the truth and I needed to act. I couldn't let myself be toyed with, humiliated, and betrayed without some form of control. It wasn't anger at first. It was clarity. I had to protect myself and I had to reclaim my life. And yet, even as I contemplated confrontation, there was a twisted sense of attachment still there. I loved her, or at least I loved the memory of what I thought we had. That love now mixed with suspicion, pain, and a desire to see the truth laid bare. I knew that facing her directly might destroy what little remained of my peace. But the calls and texts kept coming, each one a dagger hidden in velvet. "Everything okay, Michael? I love you so much." Each time, I felt a surge of rage mixed with despair. How could someone speak such words while committing the ultimate betrayal behind my back? How could love and cruelty coexist in one person so seamlessly? It was during those quiet, sleepless nights that the first seeds of my plan began to take root. Not violent revenge, not impulsive or public, but a cold, calculated reclaiming of power. I would not be humiliated anymore. I would not be toyed with. And somewhere in the mix of heartbreak and anger, I knew that I would confront the truth soon. It was late at night when my phone buzzed again. I stared at her name, Emily, on the screen, my fingers frozen, my chest tightening. I knew she was calling. I knew she would speak like everything was fine. And yet, part of me, some twisted part, felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she would apologize. She picked up immediately, her voice dripping with sweetness, like honey over venom. "Hey babe, everything okay?" she asked casually, as if she had no idea that she had destroyed me in front of everyone just days ago. I wanted to scream into the phone, to demand answers, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I was drowning in. Instead, I stayed silent. I let her words wash over me, each one like a reminder of the absurdity of our situation. "What's wrong? What happened? I love you so much." Her tone was perfect, too perfect, like a performance crafted to hide a crime. And deep down, I knew it. I knew she had betrayed me, and this call was just part of the act. She asked if I was tired, if I had eaten, if I wanted her to come over. I listened, numb, as my mind replayed the events from the past weeks, from the parties to the whispers, to the casual insults that had chipped away at my soul. Each word she said now felt like mockery, a way to gaslight me into believing that everything was normal. I could feel the tension rising in my chest. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. I wanted to hang up, walk away, disappear. But I stayed. I stayed because I needed to hear the truth from her own mouth, to catch her, to confirm what I already feared. And then it hit me. The casual, sweet words couldn't cover the truth any longer. I had seen the signs, the late-night messages, the secretive smiles, the way she acted around others. The realization was slow, like ice melting in my veins. She had been with someone else. She had crossed a line that no amount of apology could erase. The rage came in waves, but underneath it, there was a cold, precise clarity. I realized that this call, this facade of care, was her attempt to manipulate me, to draw me back in so that she could continue her deception. I felt a mix of hatred, heartbreak, and an almost clinical awareness of the situation. I wanted her to feel the consequences, but I knew confrontation now would only satisfy her need for drama. I needed something else, something final, something that would reclaim my dignity and strip her of the power she had wielded so effortlessly over me. That night, I started planning, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I needed to protect myself, to take control, and to ensure that she could never hurt me this way again. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but it wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, a measured response to years of manipulation and betrayal. I spent hours thinking, pacing, imagining the documents, the legal letters, the quiet but devastating reality that would soon fall upon her. The humiliation she had inflicted on me was public. My revenge, if you could call it that, would be private, precise, and irreversible. By morning, I had made my decision. I would move forward with cold determination. Love no longer bound me. Fear no longer controlled me. Only clarity, only justice, only the reclaiming of my life mattered. And somewhere in that darkness, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The days that followed were unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, every time I saw Emily's name, my stomach turned. I wanted to confront her, but a part of me was terrified of what I would hear. I had built up a mental fortress of denial, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things, that maybe she was just stressed, distracted, tired. But deep down, I knew better. Her behavior had changed subtly but unmistakably. She would leave the room to take a call, suddenly overly protective of her phone. Her laughter when texting seemed too long, too controlled, like she was hiding a secret. The casual affection she had shown before was replaced with carefully timed gestures, almost as if she were rehearsing her own performance. I tried to confront her gently at first, asking innocuous questions about her day. Her answers were too smooth, too rehearsed, leaving me with an uneasy feeling that something was off. I could feel my heart sinking with every word. The trust one had built over years was crumbling, slipping through my fingers like sand. Then the confirmation came like a hammer I could not avoid. A friend, someone I trusted, unintentionally dropped a detail that didn't fit. The name, the place, the timing. It all clicked into a horrifying picture. Emily had been with someone else. Not once, not casually, but repeatedly. The realization was like being hit by a freight train. I felt a mixture of emotions I couldn't untangle. Shock, anger, despair, betrayal, and disbelief all collided inside me. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the wall, unable to speak, unable to move. My love for her, my years of trust, my commitment, it all felt meaningless now. And the thing that hurt the most? The casualness. The way she treated it as if it were nothing. I remembered the party, her laughter, the way she called me a cuckold. The humiliation was no longer just words. It was a prelude to a deeper, darker reality. She had been systematically dismantling my confidence while building a secret life I never knew existed. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, anything, but I did none of those things. Instead, I felt a cold, precise clarity begin to settle in my mind. If I reacted with emotion, I would give her the power she sought. I had to be smarter. I had to reclaim control. I spent the following days in a haze, going through the motions of life while mentally plotting my next steps. Every detail I had once overlooked, the small smiles, the whispered excuses, the late-night messages, suddenly made sense. It was all part of her plan, all part of her control over me. I knew what I had to do, not out of spite, not out of anger, but to reclaim my dignity, my life, my sense of self. Divorce wasn't just an option. It was a shield, a statement, a way to take back what had been stolen. The thought of her reaction, the inevitability of her losing her power over me, gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. The most devastating part was the betrayal itself. Love, trust, years of shared memories. All of it reduced to nothing by a casual, hidden affair. I had been blind, naive, thinking that love alone could protect me from deceit. But now I knew that love could not stop betrayal, and blind trust could leave you broken beyond repair. By the end of that week, I had begun preparing. Legal documents, consultations, the cold machinery of divorce. I did it silently, meticulously, like a chess player moving pieces with precision, knowing exactly how each move would shift the power dynamic. I would not be a victim anymore. Even as I planned, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of me mourned the woman I thought I knew, the life I thought I had. Another part burned with a quiet, methodical desire to regain control and reclaim my dignity. And somewhere in that mix of grief and determination, I began to feel a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. After I confirmed her betrayal, something inside me shifted. The initial shock and raw pain were still there, but they had been replaced by a calculated, icy determination. I realized that if I allowed myself to react impulsively, she would win. She thrived on chaos, on my emotional turmoil. I couldn't give her that satisfaction. Not anymore. I began meticulously planning every step. Not out of anger, not from the heat of the moment, but out of a cold, deliberate sense of justice. Divorce would be my weapon, my shield, my reclaiming of power. I researched lawyers, legal strategies, and every way to protect myself emotionally and financially. I wanted her to realize that the game she had been playing had ended, and I was no longer a pawn. Every night, I reviewed her behaviors, her lies, the subtle manipulations that had worn me down over months. Each memory fueled my focus. I made lists, notes, timelines. I wanted a clear record of everything she had done, so that when the time came, I could act with unshakable certainty. The emotional chaos she had created became my blueprint for action. I began drafting documents, filling out forms, writing letters. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that she had stolen. I imagined the moment she would receive notice. Not just any notice, but the formal declaration that our marriage, her control, and her power over me were over. I visualized the look on her face, the disbelief, the realization that she could no longer manipulate me. Even as I meticulously plotted, I kept my emotions in check. I allowed myself moments of reflection, but no moment of weakness. I knew that any slip, any hint that I was still emotionally fragile, would give her an advantage. My cold calculation was my armor, my method of survival. Friends and colleagues noticed my quiet intensity. I smiled when necessary, joked when required, but inside, I was a man with a singular purpose: to reclaim his life. I wasn't acting out of vengeance in the traditional sense. I was acting out of self-preservation. This was not revenge born of rage. It was strategy born of necessity. I started imagining the conversations, the questions, the shock she would face. I wanted her to feel the gravity of her choices, to understand that her games had consequences. And yet, I also wanted to remain detached, unmoved by her attempts to manipulate or guilt me. I would act deliberately with calm precision. Every step of the process became almost ritualistic. I gathered evidence, documented conversations, and secured legal advice. My mind was sharp, focused, like a surgeon dissecting every detail of a case. I knew the stakes were high, and I couldn't allow emotion to cloud judgment. But underneath it all, there was a strange, quiet satisfaction. Not cruelty, not hatred, but a recognition that I was no longer powerless. I had taken the first steps to reclaim my life, to dismantle the control she had held over me for so long. I was no longer the man she could mock, manipulate, or humiliate at will. Even as I planned, I wrestled with lingering sadness. Love, after all, doesn't disappear overnight. The memories of better times, of laughter, of intimacy, haunted me. But I knew that love without respect, love without trust, was a dangerous illusion, and I had no intention of being trapped in it any longer. By the time I finalized the first drafts of legal papers, I felt a cold, powerful sense of clarity. The plan was set, the path was clear, and when the moment came, I would execute it with precision. I would not be a victim. I would not be humiliated again. I would be the one holding the power. Even as I meticulously planned my next steps, I couldn't escape the storm raging inside me. Love and hatred, grief and determination. They collided and twisted together, making it impossible to separate one from the other. I loved Emily, or at least I loved the version of her I thought I knew. And yet, I despised the person she had revealed herself to be. There were moments when I would sit alone, staring at the ceiling, and feel my chest tighten with grief. Memories of happier times came unbidden. Our first date, the late-night walks, the quiet mornings we shared. Each memory was a bittersweet knife, reminding me of what had been lost and what I had once cherished. I struggled with anger that simmered just below the surface. It wasn't the fiery, impulsive anger that makes people lash out. It was a cold, deep-seated rage that demanded justice, control, and recognition. I wanted her to know the consequences of what she had done. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. At the same time, I wrestled with guilt. Was I overreacting? Had I missed something, some explanation, some sign that would absolve her? But the evidence was irrefutable. Her actions, her lies, her deliberate mockery. I realized that guilt had no place here, only clarity and purpose. Sleep became a rare commodity. At night, I would replay every interaction, every whispered insult, every casual deception. I analyzed them like a detective examining clues, searching for patterns, motives, and weaknesses. My emotional pain became a tool, sharpening my focus and strengthening my resolve. Despite the emotional turmoil, a strange sense of empowerment emerged. I realized that by confronting the truth and acting deliberately, I was reclaiming something that had been stolen from me: my agency, my dignity, my sense of self. The pain was still there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I also felt a sense of moral reckoning. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about asserting boundaries, demanding respect, and refusing to allow deceit and humiliation to define my life. The cold calculation of my plan was balanced by a deep understanding of the emotional consequences, both hers and mine. There were moments of doubt, moments when I longed to forgive, to pretend it hadn't happened, to grasp at the illusion of love I once believed in. But each time, the memory of humiliation, the casual cruelty, and the betrayal itself shattered that fragile hope. I knew that forgiveness without accountability would be a betrayal of myself. I began journaling my thoughts, trying to untangle the knots of emotion and strategy. Every sentence I wrote was a release, a way to articulate the storm inside without giving it uncontrolled power. I documented my grief, my anger, my plans, and even my lingering love. It was messy, raw, and terrifyingly honest. Yet in the midst of the struggle, I found moments of clarity and focus that I had never experienced before. The emotional turmoil, rather than weakening me, became a crucible forging a stronger, more self-aware version of myself. I realized that true power didn't come from domination or revenge. It came from self-possession, from understanding the full depth of one's emotions, and from acting deliberately. By the end of those long, sleepless nights, I was ready. My plan was set, my resolve was firm, and my heart, though wounded, was steady. I understood now that life had changed irreversibly. I would no longer be the man she could humiliate, manipulate, or betray at will. I was reclaiming myself piece by piece, emotion by emotion, decision by decision. Once I had accepted the betrayal and harnessed my emotions, I began preparing. This was not about impulsive acts or reckless anger. It was about precision, strategy, and reclaiming what had been stolen. My dignity, my freedom, my control over my life. I researched every legal step, consulted lawyers, and gathered documentation. I wanted everything laid out meticulously, so there would be no room for error, no chance for her to manipulate the outcome. I started compiling evidence of her behavior, the parties, the humiliations, the lies. Every text message, every casual insult, every subtle manipulation was cataloged. My mind became a machine of calculation, analyzing patterns and anticipating how she would react to each move I made. I wanted her to understand, when the time came, that her power was gone. The process was cold and methodical. I drafted the initial divorce papers carefully, ensuring that my requests were fair, precise, and calculated to protect myself. Every word mattered. Every clause was intentional. The act of writing the documents became almost cathartic. Each sentence was a reclaiming of my autonomy, a step away from being the person she had demeaned for so long. Psychologically, I prepared myself for the confrontation without confrontation. I knew that her reaction would be emotional, manipulative, and dramatic. I visualized it all, rehearsed it in my mind, and practiced my calm, detached response. I could not allow myself to be baited back into the chaos she thrived on. My silence and composure would be my ultimate weapon. I also began to anticipate the aftermath. Friends, family, and colleagues would notice the shift. She would likely attempt to rally support, to frame herself as the victim. I prepared for this, reinforcing my own narrative, ensuring that I remained grounded, unshaken, and clear in my reasoning. Evenings became long sessions of preparation, sitting at my desk, going over each legal detail, each possible scenario. I reminded myself that this was not about revenge in a petty sense. It was about survival, respect, and closure. I wanted her to understand that the consequences of betrayal are not always dramatic, but they are inevitable. The coldness of my plan contrasted sharply with the emotional storms I had endured. I had transformed the hurt, the humiliation, the rage into a precise, controlled strategy. It was strangely liberating. I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt I was in control again. I imagined the day the papers would be delivered. I imagined her reading the words, the inevitability sinking in, and the realization that she could no longer control or humiliate me. The thought brought a grim satisfaction, not cruelty but justice. I had suffered enough. Now the balance would be restored. Even as I prepared, I continued to reflect on my own growth. I had emerged from this experience stronger, more aware of my worth, and more capable of defending it. The betrayal had shattered my illusions, but it had also forged resilience and self-possession. I realized that true power is not in humiliating others but in refusing to be humiliated, in maintaining control over your own life no matter the chaos around you. The final step was patience. I knew the timing had to be perfect, the execution flawless. I waited, watched, and calculated, ensuring that when the moment came, it would have the full weight of inevitability behind it. My plan was not impulsive. It was deliberate. It was precise. And it was mine. The day I finally filed the divorce papers was surreal. It wasn't a moment of triumph in the traditional sense, but a quiet, powerful assertion of control. I walked into the courthouse with a steady heart and clear mind, each step echoing the transformation I had undergone. No trembling, no hesitation, just clarity and resolve. I handed over the documents, my hands steady, my expression calm. Each signature, each official stamp, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been eroded by betrayal and humiliation. The process was meticulous, almost ritualistic, and I followed it with precision. I could feel the weight of years of manipulation lifting with every completed step. As I left the courthouse, the city felt different. The streets that once seemed suffocating now felt open, expansive. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I wasn't bound by her lies, her cruelty, or her control anymore. I was free, but freedom came with a price. The memories, the pain, the betrayal, they lingered. I knew that the wounds wouldn't heal overnight. The humiliation, the mockery, the casual cruelty, they were scars etched into my mind. And yet, standing there, I realized that I had taken the ultimate step to reclaim my dignity. I thought about Emily, about how she would react when the papers reached her. I imagined the shock, the anger, the disbelief, and I felt neither glee nor satisfaction in a petty sense. It was the inevitability of justice. She had played her games, and now the consequences were real. In the weeks that followed, I navigated the legal process with calculated precision. I anticipated her arguments, her attempts at manipulation, and countered them with calm, factual clarity. I refused to let emotion dictate my actions. Every interaction, every negotiation, was guided by the cold logic I had cultivated during those sleepless nights of planning. Yet, even amidst the strategic calculations, I felt an unexpected clarity about myself. I realized that the betrayal, the humiliation, and the heartbreak had forged a stronger, more self-aware version of me. I had emerged from this experience not broken, but transformed. Friends who had witnessed parts of the ordeal remarked on the change. They saw a man who had been deeply wounded, yet now moved with calm determination and quiet authority. I realized that power doesn't always scream. It sometimes speaks in the steady, measured steps of someone who has reclaimed control over their life. The final hearing came, and I sat quietly, listening to the proceedings. Emily tried her usual manipulations, her attempts to guilt and sway the outcome, but I remained composed. Each objection, each plea, was met with calm responses, evidence, and unwavering resolve. My lawyer described my preparation as meticulous and unshakable. And I knew it was true. When the judge finally signed the decree, the sense of finality was profound. The marriage, once a source of love and connection, now existed only as a memory, a lesson, and a chapter of my life I had survived. I was no longer subject to her cruelty. I was no longer the man she mocked. I was free, whole, and, most importantly, in control. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt the sun on my face, the city alive around me, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed fully. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also taught me something vital. That self-respect, dignity, and control over one's own life are the ultimate forms of power. Sitting here today, recounting everything, I still feel the weight of those months pressing down on me. Betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. They leave marks that don't fade easily. But they also leave lessons, and I've learned more about myself than I ever thought possible. I've learned the limits of trust, the cost of blind love, and the strength that comes from reclaiming your own power. I want to speak directly to anyone watching this. If you've been betrayed, mocked, or humiliated, know that you are not powerless. Pain can be transformative. Anguish can forge clarity. Betrayal can, paradoxically, reveal the true measure of your strength. My story is a testament to that. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when I cried, when despair felt endless, when the idea of moving forward seemed impossible. But each of those nights built a foundation for the resolve that carried me through. Each tear, each pang of humiliation, became a brick in the walls of my self-possession. Reclaiming your life is not about vengeance. It's about boundaries, dignity, and respect for yourself first and foremost. True power is not in hurting those who hurt you. It's in refusing to allow their actions to define who you are or what you will become. That was my guiding principle throughout this ordeal. I want to leave you with this thought. Betrayal can come from the people we love most, the ones we trust with everything. And when it does, it shakes you to your core. But it also forces you to confront your own strength, your resilience, and your ability to rise above manipulation. You can survive it. You can thrive after it.
Wow. That was an incredibly intense and emotional story. Thank you for trusting us and sharing such a personal and painful experience with such honesty. Your journey, from betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, to reclaiming your life and dignity, is truly powerful, and I know it will resonate with many of our viewers who have faced similar struggles. To everyone watching, this story is a reminder of the strength we all have inside us, even in the darkest moments. If Michael's story moved you, made you think, or helped you reflect on your own life, I encourage you to leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or simply your support. It all matters. And don't forget to subscribe to When She Broke Us for more raw, real, and unfiltered stories of betrayal, resilience, and personal growth. Every story here reminds us that even through pain, there's a way to reclaim our power and dignity. Thank you for watching, and remember, your strength is greater than any betrayal, and your voice deserves to be heard.